Today's story comes from Pu Songling's Strange Stories from a Chinese studio, and it's called The Country of Yaksha. Is this a travel diary? Not quite. Let me take you through it. Once upon a time in ancient China, there was a merchant named Xu from Jiaoshu. One day, he set out on a sea voyage for business, but out of nowhere, a fierce storm hit, and his ship got blown off course. When the winds finally calmed down, Xu opened his eyes to find himself in a deserted place surrounded by lush green mountains. He thought,
"This place looks strange, but maybe someone lives here. I should check it out."
So, he secured his boat, packed some food, and stepped onto the shore. As he wandered into the mountains, he suddenly noticed that the cliffs on both sides were filled with countless caves, almost like a beehive. He could hear faint voices coming from within. Curious, Xu approached one of the cave openings and peeked inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. 2 yaksha. They had razor-sharp white teeth, their eyes gleaming like lanterns, and they were ripping into a raw deer, devouring it in a gruesome feast. Xu's face turned pale, and his heart raced as he turned to run. But the yaksha spotted him. One lunged at him, stretching out its long claws and dragging him into the cave. The yaksha emitted bird-like screeches, seeming to communicate with each other, as they fought over Xu's clothes, apparently planning to eat him.
"Help! No!"
Xu screamed in terror. In a panic, he pulled out some dried meat and bread from his backpack and offered it to the yaksha.
"Eat this! Please, don't eat me!"
To his surprise, they paused and eagerly grabbed the food, devouring it. But soon, they emptied Xu's bag, realized there was no more food, and got furious, grabbing Xu again.
"Wait! Let me go! I have a pot on my ship. I can cook for you."
Xu desperately gestured, hoping they would understand. The yaksha seemed to get it, so they followed him back to the boat. Xu quickly set up a fire, boiled the leftover raw deer meat, and served it to them. The yaksha were thrilled and looked quite satisfied. As night fell, the yaksha blocked the cave entrance with a giant stone, seemingly afraid Xu would escape. Xu curled up in a corner, too scared to close his eyes, filled with dread about his fate. The next morning, the yaksha left to hunt again, still blocking the cave entrance. Before long, they returned with a dead deer for Xu. He was terrified but knew he had to keep going. He skinned the deer and cooked the meat. When the yaksha came back, they gobbled it up ravenously. Days turned into weeks, and the yaksha grew accustomed to Xu. They stopped blocking the cave and didn't confine him anymore. In fact, they started treating him like family, often asking him to help cook the meat. Xu even began to understand their calls, mimicking their sounds, and soon he was speaking yaksha language. One day, the yaksha brought a female yaksha to Xu and seemed to want to marry her off to him. Xu was terrified at first, shaking and too scared to approach her. But she came close, being surprisingly gentle. Eventually, Xu felt he had no choice and ended up marrying her. The female yaksha was overjoyed. Whenever she went out, she would leave Xu with cooked meat, caring for him like a true wife. The yaksha really began to like Xu, often taking him deep into the caves to share their hunts, and they all lived together like one big happy family. As time passed, Xu lived in this strange land for 4 years. Then one day, his wife gave birth to 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. While they looked human, they resembled Xu more than their yaksha mother. The yaksha adored these kids, always playing and teasing them. One day, while all the yaksha were out hunting, Xu was left alone to watch the kids. Suddenly, another female yaksha approached from a different cave, trying to get close to Xu. He quickly backed away and firmly rejected her. The female yaksha got furious, shoving Xu to the ground and looking ready to explode. Just then, Xu's wife returned, saw what was happening, and flew into a rage. She jumped into fight, eventually biting off the other Yaksha's ear. To protect her husband, she became even more vigilant, sticking close to Shu and not letting any other Yaksha near him. 3 more years passed, and Shu's kids grew up able to walk on their own. Shu often taught them human language, and gradually, they began to pick it up.
Father, mother.
Their childish voices began to carry a hint of human essence. Even though they were still kids, they ran through the forest with ease, as if they were walking on flat ground. The bond between Shu and his children deepened, and he yearned more and more to return to his homeland someday. One day, Shu's wife took one of their son and the daughter out, but they didn't return for half the day. As a strong northern wind began to blow, Shu found himself thinking about his hometown again. He wandered down to the shore and saw that his old boat was still there. That's when he made up his mind. He decided to take his son and leave this place to return to his homeland. The kid wanted to tell his mother, but Shu stopped him. He gathered him onto the boat, and after sailing for a day and night, they finally made it back to Jiaoshu. When Shu arrived home, he discovered that his wife had remarried. Shu didn't let that get him down, though. He still had 2 magical Yaksha pearls, which he sold for a large fortune. Overnight, he became a wealthy man. He named his son Biao. By the time Biao was around 14 or 15, he was already incredibly strong and had a wild, fearless personality. The local officials took notice of his abilities and appointed him to a military post. Biao quickly distinguished himself in battles along the border, and by the time he was 18, he had risen to the rank of vice general. Years later, a merchant was blown by a storm to Mount Womei. There, he came across a young boy and was shocked to find out that the boy was Chinese. The merchant struck up a conversation with him and learned that he was Shu's other son. The boy was thrilled when the merchant told him that his father had returned to Jiaoshu and that Biao was now a vice general. The boy was filled with excitement but also hesitation. He invited the merchant back to his cave, offering him some venison. As they sat and talked, the boy said,
"My father is from Jiaozhou too."
The merchant nodded, saying,
Yes, your father is an old friend of mine, and now his son is a vice general.
The boy looked puzzled and asked.
"What's a vice general?"
The merchant explained.
In China, a vice general is a high-ranking official. He rides in carriages, lives in a grand house, and people treat him with the utmost respect.
Hearing this, the boy became even more curious, but he hesitated.
"I've thought about going back, but my mother is a Yaksha. She doesn't look or speak like humans. If people discover us, we might be in danger. Why don't I take you back when the northern wind blows again? You can send a message to your family through me and see what they say."
The merchant hid in the cave for half a year, sometimes peeking outside, but he was too scared to make any move as he kept seeing Yaksha around the mountain. Months later, when the northern wind began to howl, the boy took the merchant aside and reminded him.
"Don't forget my message."
The merchant nodded. The boy also gave him more venison to take on his journey. With that, the merchant returned to Jiaoshu. When the merchant got back, he found Biao and told him all about his experience at Mount Womei. Biao was heartbroken and immediately decided to search for his brother. But his father tried to stop him, warning that the ocean storms and sea monsters were too dangerous. Biao wouldn't listen. He wept bitterly and eventually got permission from the Jiaoshu authorities to take 2 soldiers and set sail. But on their voyage, they were met with strong headwinds. The ship was tossed about for half a month, and soon they couldn't tell which way they were going. Out of nowhere, a giant wave capsized the boat, and Biao was thrown into the sea. He was tossed around by the waves, struggling to stay afloat, when suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the water. It grabbed Biao and dragged him to a nearby shore. When Biao regained his senses, he saw that the creature was a Yaksha-like monster. Surprisingly, Biao spoke to it in Yaksha language. The Yaksha was startled and asked who he was. Biao explained that he was trying to get to Mount Womei. The Yaksha's face lit up with excitement.
Oh, you're headed to my homeland, Mount Womei. My apologies. But you've drifted 8,000 miles off course. This is the land of poison dragons. You won't reach Mount Womei from here.
The Yaksha found a boat for Biao and sped through the water, moving like an arrow. Before long, they reached the northern shore. When Biao got off the boat, he saw a young boy wandering by the riverbank. He walked closer and, sure enough, it was his brother. The two embraced tightly, crying together. Biao's brother told him that their mother and sister were doing well. Overjoyed, Biao decided that they should all return to China together. However, Biao's brother urged him not to take their mother and sister back to China, worried they might face prejudice and harm. But Biao was confident.
I'm a high-ranking official in China, no one would dare trouble us.
As they hesitated, a boat appeared in the distance, carried swiftly by the wind. Biao was overjoyed. Without further delay, he brought his mother and siblings aboard. With the wind at their back, they reached the shores of Yaksha within 3 days. The people on shore were terrified when they saw the strange trio, scattering in fear. Biao quickly removed his official robe and gave it to his mother and sister to wear. Once they arrived home, Biao's Yaksha mother was furious with Shu for not informing her ahead of time. She scolded him for being so thoughtless. Shu hurriedly apologized, admitting he hadn't anticipated such a situation. The household servants, seeing their new Yaksha mistress, trembled in fear, bowing and scraping before her. Biao encouraged his mother to learn Chinese and dressed her in fine silks, offering her delicious foods. Gradually, she started to feel more at ease and began integrating into human society. She and Biao's sister started wearing men's clothing, resembling the attire of northern Manchu warriors. Over the next few months, their language skills improved, and their skin became noticeably fairer. Biao's brother was named Leopard, and his sister was nicknamed Night. Both possessed extraordinary strength. Biao, feeling ashamed of his lack of education, encouraged his brother Leopard to study. Leopard was a quick learner and mastered classic texts with ease. However, he had little interest in being a scholar. Instead, he gravitated towards martial arts, training in archery and horseback riding. Eventually, he passed the military exams and earned the rank of military jinsha. He later married the daughter of a touring general. As for Night, being of a different race, no one dared to propose to her. But one day, Commander Yuan lost his wife and forcibly took Night as his bride. Night, with her immense strength, could draw a powerful bow capable of shooting down birds from over 100 paces away with perfect accuracy. Whenever Yuan went to war, Night would accompany him, fighting by his side. Many of Yuan's military victories were thanks to her. Leopard, at the age of 34, was appointed as a senior general. His mother even accompanied him on southern campaigns. In times of dire threat, she would don armor and wield weapons, personally aiding her son in battle. Wherever they went, the enemy fled in terror. The emperor granted Leopard the title of Baron, but Leopard, ever humble, submitted a petition on behalf of his mother, who was ultimately titled a noble lady. And that's where this story ends. The land of the Yaksha was a mysterious mountain world, filled with strange beings. Our main character, Shu, a man from China, was trapped there but used his wisdom and courage to integrate into Yaksha society. In the end, he brought his family back home. What did you think of the story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow, give me a like, and stay tuned for the next episode. See you then.